Picture devoting your entire life to someone, only to have them treat you like you're a burden they can't shake. Imagine pouring out all your time, energy, and heart, just to hear you're nothing but an obstacle. This isn't some made-up tale, it's my reality, the truth I kept buried for too long. If you've ever felt overlooked, unseen, or pushed aside, stick with me here. My story might just echo yours in ways you didn't expect. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. I'm Eleanor Harper, 62 years young, living in a peaceful little neighborhood just beyond Portland, Oregon. I never imagined I'd be sharing my life with the world like this. But silence, I've learned, is where bitterness festers, and I've held my tongue for far too many years. It all began when I walked away from my husband, back when I was in my late 50s. After enduring his temper, his control, his subtle cruelties for so long, I finally left. Leaving nearly shattered me, but I did it for my own peace of mind and for my daughter, Sophie. She was in her early 30s then, wrapping up college, brimming with dreams and possibilities. I thought she'd be proud of me, that she'd get why I had to go. Instead, she grew distant, accusing me of abandoning our family, of breaking everything apart. Even so, I stayed close to her, refusing to let the rift tear us apart completely. Sophie married young and had kids quickly, but her demanding job and a marriage that fell apart left her raising two little ones alone. I was there for her, always. I moved into the guest house behind her home, cooking dinners, changing diapers, and shuttling the kids to school, soccer, and birthday parties. I was there through fevers, science fairs, first heartaches, and bad dreams, quietly holding it all together without asking for much in return. I believed that's what love was, showing up, giving everything, no questions asked. But Sophie never warmed back up. If anything, she grew colder, more distant over time. She'd snap at me in front of the kids, roll her eyes, or tell me I was too involved, too outdated, too overbearing. "You're coddling them too much," she'd say sharply. "They'll never grow up strong with you hovering like that." I overheard her on the phone with friends, chuckling, "My mom's basically free daycare with too many opinions. What can you do?" I'd force a laugh from the kitchen, acting like it didn't hurt, but oh, it stung deep. What kept me going were my grandkids. They were my light. They'd race into my arms after school, snuggle up next to me on the couch, their little hearts wide open. As they grew, they'd confide in me about school, crushes, and arguments with their mom. I was their safe haven, the one they could always turn to. Yet I couldn't ignore Sophie's glances, like I was just a temporary fixture, a shadow lingering in the background of her busy life. Not her mother, not a woman with a history, just someone who cooked, cleaned, and kept her world from crumbling. I started wondering if she ever truly saw me at all. Then came the day that turned everything upside down. It began with a weariness that wasn't just being tired, it was a deep, aching exhaustion that settled into my bones. Walking from the kitchen to the porch left me gasping for breath, needing to sit. I was dropping weight, my hands trembling. The doctor ordered tests, then more tests, before sitting me down with that look that tries to cushion bad news. Cancer. Aggressive. I went home that day carrying a silence heavier than anything I'd ever known. Telling Sophie terrified me, not because of the diagnosis, but because I dreaded her reaction, feared she'd see it as just another hassle. I waited 5 days before I found the courage to tell her. She glanced up from her phone, blinked, and said, "Oh, okay, we'll sort something out," her voice flat, like she was discussing a minor errand. A few days later, she mentioned in passing, "You should probably get a nurse, Mom. I really don't have time for all this." That was the moment I stopped pretending everything was fine. She didn't ask how I was feeling, didn't offer to drive me to appointments, just suggested hiring a nurse, like I was someone else's responsibility now. So, I made the call, my heart still raw, not knowing that decision would be the first step toward a new chapter. The nurse, Clara Bennett, arrived on a Friday morning. She was 42, with short chestnut hair and warm, knowing eyes that carried a quiet strength. Sophie wasn't there when Clara first showed up. It was just me, wrapped in a shawl on the porch, pretending the chilly Oregon air didn't bite through me. Clara walked up, clipboard in hand, her smile genuine, not like the forced ones I'd grown used to. "Mrs. Harper?" she asked. "Just Eleanor," I corrected softly. She nodded, and from the moment she stepped inside, something shifted in the air. There was no awkwardness, no overdone cheer. She just saw me, not as a patient or a burden, but as a woman who needed a hand. That first week was straightforward: medication schedules, meal prep, light cleaning, doctor's visits. But Clara went beyond the basics. She noticed things, like when my hands shook before I even realized it. She brought me warm socks without me asking, refilled the bird feeder because she thought the view might lift my spirits, small gestures that meant the world. It wasn't just what she did, it was how she listened. She treated me like my thoughts mattered, like I wasn't just taking up space. After lunch, we'd sit on the porch, and I'd talk about the garden I used to tend before my body gave out. She'd listen, really hear me, then say something like, "Tell me what flowers to plant. I've got the hands, you've got the know-how." I hadn't smiled so easily in years. When Sophie stopped by, though "stopped by" is generous, since she mostly stood in the doorway scrolling her phone, she didn't ask how I was holding up. Her eyes flicked around, checking what Clara was doing or not doing. "How's the nurse working out?" she asked one afternoon, sipping her iced coffee like it was her lifeline. "She has a name," I said, maybe a bit sharply. Sophie raised an eyebrow. "Fine, how's Clara?" "She's wonderful," I answered, my voice firm. "She takes great care of me." Sophie just nodded, lips tight, and left soon after without so much as a hug goodbye. Sophie didn't bother checking my medications or asking how I was holding up. Around that time, I started noticing a shift deep inside me. The more Clara showed me kindness, the clearer it became how little I'd let myself be cared for over the years, not just during this illness, but long before, through my marriage, the divorce, and especially with Sophie. One evening, as I sat quietly, lost in worry while waiting for another scan's results, Clara spoke softly. "You've been carrying everyone else's weight for a long time, haven't you?" she said. I just stared at her, words caught in my throat. "You don't have to keep holding them all up," she went on gently. "It's okay to let someone support you for a change." That night, I broke down, not with quiet tears but with those deep, gut-wrenching sobs you hide when you think no one's listening. But Clara was there, and she didn't turn away. Oddly, Sophie started coming around more often after that, but her visits weren't warm. They carried a tense, restless edge, like she was keeping tabs, sizing things up. Her questions weren't about me, they were about Clara. "How many hours is she here? Does she make your meals too? Do you really need her every day?" It wasn't care in her voice, it was control, like she was trying to reclaim a role in a home she'd emotionally checked out of long ago. One night, after Sophie stormed out, Clara looked at me and asked, "Does she always speak to you that way?" For the first time, I admitted, "Yeah, she does." And I'd let her. The truth hung heavy between us, like a fog that wouldn't lift. Alone in my room that night, I thought about all I'd poured out, time, love, decades, and how I'd faded into the background in the process. I gazed at the framed photos of my grandkids on the shelf, then at a picture of Sophie from her wedding day. I used to see beauty in that photo, now, it just showed the distance between us. The next morning, I reached out to my lawyer, ready to take a step I'd been avoiding. I had nothing left to prove, but I still had something worth protecting. The day I met with the lawyer, the air felt different, though my joints still ached, and exhaustion clung to me from the night before. Beneath it, though, a spark of something new stirred, control, a feeling I hadn't known in years. I'd called the lawyer early that morning while Clara was out picking up my prescriptions. It was the same lawyer who'd handled my divorce years ago, and he sounded surprised but kind when I reached out. We set a private meeting for the next afternoon at his office, and I kept it from Sophie. Clara drove me there, not prying, just quietly adjusting the car's seat warmer and handing me my scarf. "Call if you need me," she said simply. I glanced back at her before stepping into the building, wanting to say thank you, but the words lodged in my throat. She seemed to understand anyway. Sitting across from Mr. Grayson, my lawyer, felt surreal. We were both older now, his hair gray, my frame thinner, but his calm presence hadn't changed. As he sifted through old documents, he looked up and said, "Eleanor, you never updated your will after the divorce." I nodded. "I know. That's why I'm here today." When I shared what I wanted, he paused, asking gently, "Are you certain about this? It's a big change." "I'm certain," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I wasn't out for revenge or to hurt Sophie, but I couldn't keep pretending our relationship was more than it was, a transaction, not a bond. With Clara's compassion showing me what care could look like, the truth was undeniable. My new will named my grandchildren as equal beneficiaries, with education trusts set up for their futures, and I included Clara, not out of obligation, but because she'd given me dignity when no one else had. I signed the papers, sealed them, and left the office with a quiet peace I hadn't known in years. But that calm didn't last. 3 days later, Sophie showed up unannounced, striding in like the house was still hers, barely acknowledging Clara as she passed her in the hall. I was in the kitchen, trying to eat a small bite despite my fading appetite. She tossed her purse on the counter and leaned against the fridge, arms crossed. "So," she said sharply, "you've been spending a lot of time with the nurse." I looked at her and said, "Her name's Clara." "Right, Clara," she replied, her voice tight. "The kids mentioned she's been driving them to school." "She offered," I said cautiously. "It helps me out, and they enjoy her company." Sophie let out a dry laugh. "Of course they do. She's probably buttering them up to win you over." I stared at my daughter, caught between shock and exhaustion. "Why would she need to win me over?" I asked. Sophie faltered. "I don't know. People have their reasons. You're not that gullible, are you, Mom?" That word, gullible, after years of piecing her life back together with my own hands, hit like a slap. Slowly, I stood, gripping the table for support. "Clara hasn't asked for a thing, Sophie. Not once. And in case you haven't noticed, she's the only one treating me like I'm worth something." My words landed hard, I saw it in her eyes, but she brushed it off with a scoff. "Whatever. Just don't be careless with your money, okay?" She was gone 7 minutes later, leaving without a goodbye, the door slamming behind her. I sat in the quiet for a long time, staring at that closed door. That evening, I found Clara folding towels in the laundry room. She glanced up, her eyes steady, and asked, "Tough day?" I nodded. "They've all been tough lately, but this one hit harder." She didn't press, just kept folding, her presence calm and grounding. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen, like I was worth seeing. I realized then that love isn't just about family ties, it's about who shows up, who respects you, who offers kindness. Sometimes, those people aren't the ones tied to you by blood, they're the ones who step in when others step out. As days passed, I felt a strange mix of strength and frailty, stronger in my heart, weaker in my body. The treatments were grueling, each session leaving me silent as the 4 dripped, feeling like it was draining me instead of healing me. My hair was thinning, a quiet reminder of how much I was losing. My appetite vanished, leaving me unable to eat much of anything. The mirror became a stranger, reflecting a woman I barely recognized anymore. But Clara stayed by my side through it all. When nausea hit hard, she was there, steady and calm. One morning, my legs buckled in the hallway, and I started to fall. Clara caught me, her arms strong, keeping me upright. She stayed up late one night, simmering bone broth from scratch when she learned it was the only thing my stomach could handle. She didn't just tend to my needs, she genuinely cared about me as a person. Sophie, on the other hand, popped in every few days, sometimes with the kids, sometimes alone, always lingering near the door like she couldn't wait to leave. Her eyes were glued to her phone, her mind clearly elsewhere. Each visit felt like a chore she was eager to check off her list. One afternoon, after a grueling treatment, I was curled up on the couch under a blanket, too weak to move much. Clara sat nearby, quietly reading, her presence a comfort. Sophie barged in, as usual, sunglasses on, clutching her coffee, barely glancing my way. "Do you really need her here every single day?" she asked, tilting her head toward Clara. Clara didn't react, just kept turning the pages of her book. "Yes," I answered simply, my voice steady. Sophie let out a sharp huff. "You're being so dramatic, Mom. I get that you're sick, but she's not family." That word, family, hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I turned to her slowly, my voice quieter than I meant but sharper than I planned. "No, she's not family. She's something more, she's here for me." Sophie rolled her eyes and paced, her steps restless. "This is absurd. You act like I've never done anything for you." "You haven't," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them, surprising even me. She stopped mid-step, her mouth opening and shutting like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. I didn't add anything else, there was no need. She muttered something about picking up the kids and left minutes later. After she was gone, Clara looked up from her book and asked softly, "You holding up okay?" "No," I whispered, my voice barely there. "But I will be." That night, I lay awake, the soft hum of the oxygen machine filling the room as I stared at the ceiling. I thought about all I'd held back over the years, all the times I put Sophie's needs above my own, her birthdays, her heartbreaks, her crises, when I dropped everything to be there. Now, all I asked for was a little support, and she couldn't offer it, didn't even try. That's when it sank in, this wasn't about her being too busy or overwhelmed. It was about her choices, and she'd chosen to keep me at arm's length, time and again. The next morning, Clara brought me a breakfast tray with toast, eggs, and sliced strawberries I hadn't asked for. She just remembered I loved them. "Thank you," I murmured, my hands trembling as I took the tray. She smiled and said, "You deserve it, Eleanor." Those words echoed in my mind all day, "You deserve it." Not the guilt, the blame, the cold visits, or being treated like a burden. For the first time, I let myself believe I was worthy of more, without shame, and I wasn't afraid to embrace it. Clara became like my shadow, but in the warmest way, moving through the house with a quiet grace, never overstepping, always present. Her steady presence started mending something deep inside me, something I didn't even know was broken. She noticed the little things, how I winced when I stood, how I rubbed my temples when memories hit hard, how I lingered at the window when the grandkids' laughter drifted in from the yard. One chilly spring afternoon, I sat in the garden, a blanket draped over my lap, savoring the crisp air that made me feel alive. Clara came out with 2 mugs of tea and handed me one before sitting beside me. "You're always looking out this window," she said softly. "What's on your mind?" I didn't answer right away, watching a blue jay flit along the fence, its feathers catching the light like a shimmer of silk. "I think about everything I've given," I said quietly. "And how little I've ever asked for in return." Clara stayed silent, sipping her tea, giving me space to keep going. "I raised Sophie," I said, my voice steady now. "I held her through fevers, heartbreaks, her divorce. I stayed up late baking cupcakes for her kids' birthdays, canceled my own plans, ignored my health to keep her world spinning. And she doesn't see it," Clara said gently, her words soft but true. I nodded, the weight of it settling in. Worse, she sees it and still acts like I'm something she can toss aside. A heavy silence stretched between us, not awkward, just full, like it carried the weight of truth. Then Clara said something that stayed with me. Sometimes the people we give everything to think we owe it to them. Her words stung, but they also soothed a raw ache inside me. She understood not just my situation, but me as a person. That evening, alone in the den, I stared at the old filing cabinet where I kept my important papers, insurance, deeds, medical directives, and my will. I hadn't touched it since the divorce, leaving Sophie as the sole heir, because back then, it felt right. She was my only child, my legacy. But now, she wasn't acting like a daughter, not showing up like family. I thought about my grandkids, their sweet, curious hearts shaped more by my love than Sophie's presence. I thought about Clara, who'd become more than a nurse, a friend, a protector, a steady light. I knew what needed to be done. The next morning, I called Mr. Grayson again. 3 days later, we met, and I told him clearly, my grandchildren get equal shares, and Clara gets the house and the savings account. He raised an eyebrow. So, your daughter gets nothing? He asked. I nodded firmly. That's right. He paused, then gave a slow nod. Understood. I signed the papers, my hand trembling slightly, not from doubt, but from the gravity of what I'd done. After signing the papers, I felt a weight lift, like I'd reclaimed a piece of myself I didn't know I'd lost. That evening, Clara found me sitting on the porch, lost in thought. You've been awfully quiet today, she said gently. I made a big choice, I told her. A life-changing one. She looked worried but didn't push me to explain. I've spent my whole life trying to earn the approval of people who didn't deserve it, I said, my voice soft but steady. Clara reached over, her warm hand resting on mine. Maybe it's time you stop trying to prove yourself and start living for you, she said. I met her gaze, really saw her, and something clicked inside me, not full peace yet, but a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. That calm didn't stick around long, does it ever? A few days after I updated my will, I overheard Sophie talking to one of the kids during another of her unannounced visits, claiming she just wanted to check in, though her eyes stayed glued to her phone, asking questions that felt more like an interrogation. Does the nurse sleep here? She asked my grandson when she thought I was out of earshot, her voice drifting down the hallway where I stood, unseen. Does she use Nana's car? What about the credit cards? Has she bought anything for herself? My heart froze, not from worry, but from the realization she was digging, not caring. I stepped into the room, moving slowly. Sophie, can we talk for a second? I asked. She jumped, then followed me to the kitchen, arms crossed tightly. What's up? She said, her tone sharp. I looked her straight in the eyes. Why are you questioning my grandkids about Clara? Her face flickered, guilt, irritation, then her usual defensiveness. I'm just looking out for you, she said. You're sick, Mom. People like her prey on people like you. I didn't raise my voice or let tears fall. I spoke calmly, like I was reading a grocery list. In 1 month, Clara has shown me more respect, kindness, and care than you have in over a decade. Sophie let out a scoff. She's paid to do that. And you? I asked, my voice steady. What's your reason for not showing up? She went quiet, her words stuck. Then she said something that sealed it all for me. You're being foolish, Mom. You don't even know her. You're just lonely. That word, foolish, lit a fire in me, not wild, but a slow, steady burn from years of holding it in. I stood, my legs shaky not from weakness but from a lifetime's worth of contained anger. I may be sick, I said, but I'm not foolish and I'm not lonely. I've just stopped mistaking nearness for love. Her face went blank, like she sensed the ground shifting beneath her, the control she thought she had, emotional, financial, moral, slipping away. She left without a word, her heels clicking down the hall like sharp warnings. That night, I sat at the dining table with Clara and poured out everything. She listened, her face calm but caring, not interrupting once. Do you want me to step back for a bit? She asked softly. Give you and Sophie some room? No, I said firmly. This is my home, and you're not the issue. We sat quietly for a moment, the air heavy but comforting. Then I reached for her hand and gave it a squeeze. I need you here, I told her. Her eyes softened, and she said, then I'm not going anywhere. The next week was quiet, too quiet. Sophie didn't come by, but the kids still stopped over after school, their sweet voices filling the house, though I caught a hint of hesitation, a touch of confusion in their words. Sophie had said something to them, I didn't know what, but I could feel its shadow. Then, one afternoon, Mr. Grayson called. Your daughter came to my office, he said, his voice heavy. She was asking about your will, pushing for details. I couldn't tell her anything, but she's suspicious. She's upset. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in silence for nearly an hour, letting it sink in. Sophie knew, or at least she sensed something had changed. That evening, as the sun sank behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of gold, I stepped into the garden, barefoot on the cool grass. The sharp breeze made me feel alive, awake. This wasn't about money, it never had been. It was about what I'd leave behind, not in bank accounts or property, but in love, memories, and the people I'd touched. I decided my legacy wouldn't be silence anymore. The next morning, a knock came at the door, sharp, deliberate, not here for small talk. Clara answered it, and I was finishing my tea when Sophie's voice sliced through the air. "I need to speak to my mother alone." Clara didn't waver, she glanced at me, waiting for my cue. I gave a small nod, and she stepped aside, her presence steady as always. Sophie stormed into the living room, her eyes wild, her face taut with tension. "I want the truth," she said, her voice sharp. I didn't ask what she meant, I already knew. "I talked to your lawyer," she went on. "He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. I can feel it." I set my teacup down carefully. "What do you feel, Sophie?" I asked. She locked eyes with me. "That you're giving everything to her, to Clara, a stranger, instead of your own daughter." There it was, raw and unfiltered, not concern or regret, just entitlement. I held her gaze for a long moment, my silence making her shift uncomfortably. She'd always hated when I didn't respond right away. "I gave you everything I had," I said finally, my voice steady. "My time, my heart, my life, and you gave me distance, blame, nothing." "I didn't," she started, but I cut her off, calm but firm. "You did. And when I got sick, you didn't ask how to help. You asked how to pass me off." Her arms crossed tightly, her defenses up as always. "I have kids, Mom. A job. I can't just drop everything." "I did," I said simply. "I dropped everything for you, over and over, for years. And now I need someone, and you're mad because it's not you." She looked away, biting her lip, then snapped back. "She's manipulating you." "She's caring for me," I corrected. "And there's a difference." Her voice climbed, sharp and desperate. "You're really leaving her everything after all I've done?" I stood slowly, my body aching, my legs weak, but I stood anyway. "You never asked what I needed," I said. "Not once. You only saw what you thought you deserved." Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't from sadness, they were anger, disbelief. "She's not family," she shouted. "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "She's more than that." And those words broke something in her. Sophie didn't cry or yell, she just stood there, frozen in place. Then, in a whisper I'll never shake, she said, "You're going to regret this." She turned and left, the door slamming hard behind her. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch at the sound. A few minutes later, Clara came in, quiet as always, not asking what happened, she didn't need to. She just sat beside me, her presence steady and calm. "I think she might hate me now," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. "She doesn't hate you," Clara said gently. "She's just angry that you're not under her thumb anymore." I stared down at my hands, once strong enough to raise a daughter and hold a home together, now trembling in their stillness. "She always said I was the strong one," I whispered, my voice catching. "You are," Clara replied. "You just forgot that strength means saying no sometimes, too." That night, I lay awake, the weight of years pressing down on me, all the pain I'd swallowed, all the excuses I'd made for Sophie, all the times I told myself she'd come around, that she'd learn to love me back. But some people don't grow into love, they grow into entitlement, and when they don't get what they want, they lash out. Sophie couldn't hurt me anymore, I'd made a different choice, and that choice was already reshaping everything. After that day, the air in the house changed. The silence between Sophie and me wasn't the kind that begged to be broken, it was cold, solid, like a wall built brick by brick. She didn't come by for 8 days, no calls, no texts, just emptiness. But it wasn't a peaceful quiet, because Sophie was busy outside of it. Clara started hearing murmurs from neighbors. Is that woman living there full-time now? I heard Eleanor rewrote her will, gave everything to the nurse. Poor Sophie, after all she's done for her mom. The sympathy wasn't for me, it was for Sophie, who'd spun herself as the wrong daughter, the victim. In her story, Clara was the schemer, the outsider, the gold digger tearing us apart. I told Clara to brush it off, but I could see it wearing on her. She stopped lingering in the front yard, quit chatting with the mailman. One night, I found her in the laundry room, quietly crying, wiping tears with her hoodie sleeve. "This is my mess," I said, my heart heavy. "No," she whispered, her voice soft but firm. "I'm the one they're accusing, and I can't even defend myself." I rested a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to, I know who you are." But the rumors were creeping into every corner of our lives. Even my grandkids started pulling back, not cruelly, but with a hesitation, a heaviness in their eyes. They visited less, stopped asking Clara for help with homework or snacks. One evening, my oldest grandson sat beside me on the porch, unusually quiet. "Mom says you're mad at her," he mumbled, staring at his shoes. My heart cracked. "I'm not mad," I told him gently. "I'm just tired of pretending everything's okay when it's not." He didn't look up. "She said Clara's taking our house." Those words hit harder than any insult I'd ever heard. Clara stepped out with lemonade, saw the tension, and hesitated. I gave her a small shake of my head, and she slipped back inside without a word. I turned to my grandson. "Clara's not taking anything," I said firmly. "She's taking care of me." He nodded, uncomfortable, and quickly changed the subject. After he left, I sat in the dark for hours, the weight of it all pressing down. Clara joined me, and we watched the porch lights from neighboring houses flicker on, one by one. "Maybe I should go," she said finally, her voice heavy. I turned to her, stunned. "What?" "If I leave, maybe Sophie will ease up. Maybe the kids will come back." I shook my head firmly. "No, you don't get punished for being kind." She looked at me, her eyes weary. "But I am being punished." And I saw it then, Sophie's fight wasn't just with me, it was with anyone who gave me the love she wouldn't. She couldn't stand that I'd turned to someone else, not out of spite, but because I needed to. That week, Clara grew quieter, still warm, still helpful, but guarding her heart a little more, and I hated that. Sophie wasn't just trying to hurt me, she wanted to erase Clara from my life. But I'd made my choice, and I had to stand by it. The moment everything broke open didn't come with shouts or slammed doors, it came with heavy, deliberate footsteps. I was dozing in the living room, a blanket over me, when the front door burst open. Clara had just left for a quick errand. I thought it was her until Sophie's voice cut through the air, sharp and icy. "Where is she?" she demanded. Before I could fully sit up, she was in the room, her face flushed, eyes wild. "Sophie, what's going on?" I asked, pushing myself upright. She ignored me. "Where's Clara?" she snapped again, louder. "She's not here right now," I said, my heart pounding. Sophie paced, her movements restless. "Good, because I swear, Mom, if I see her in my house again," I stopped her cold. "This isn't your house." The words hung heavy, like a storm cloud ready to burst. She froze, her eyes narrowing. "What did you just say?" I steadied my breath, my body trembling not just from illness but from years of bottled-up pain and rage. "You don't live here," I said calmly. "You don't get to storm in and threaten anyone." "I'm not threatening her," she hissed. "I'm protecting you." "From who?" I asked, my voice steady. "From the only person who hasn't left me alone these past months." Her eyes narrowed further. "She's using you." I stood, my knees shaky but holding me up. "No, Sophie, she's caring for me, something you stopped doing years ago." Those words hit her like a blow. She stepped back, as if I'd struck her. I kept going, my voice low but unwavering. You barge in here like a hurricane, throwing accusations, spreading lies, trying to chase out the one person who's kept me going. She's not family, Mom, she said, her voice tight. I didn't shout, I didn't need to. Neither are you anymore. Her face crumpled, lips trembling, eyes brimming with tears she refused to let fall, anger, not sorrow. You don't mean that, Sophie whispered, her voice trembling. I stayed silent because, deep down, part of me did. She glanced around the room, like she was seeing it for the first time. The grandkids' photos on the shelves, the cozy quilt Clara picked up from a thrift shop, the neat stack of medical forms by the door. This wasn't her home anymore, hadn't been for years. Her voice turned sharp, brittle, as she headed for the door. You're going to regret this, she said again. I didn't try to stop her or chase after her. I just sank back onto the couch, letting the quiet wrap around me like a familiar blanket. Clara came back a few minutes later, arms full of groceries, and one look at me told her everything. She was here, she said, not as a question. I nodded, too tired to speak. Clara let out a soft sigh, her shoulders slumping. Maybe I should stay somewhere else for a bit, she offered quietly. I met her gaze, my eyes weary but certain. No, Sophie's the one who needs to go, not you. That night, I lay awake, not out of fear or second-guessing, but because I'd finally drawn a line in the sand, and I wasn't crossing back over it. I thought Sophie had hit her limit after our last clash, that she might back off, maybe even take a hard look at herself. I was wrong, she didn't retreat, she doubled down. It started small, with a letter from a local probate attorney landing in my mailbox, formally questioning the validity of my new will. A few days later, a notice arrived. Sophie had filed a petition, claiming I'd been coerced when I rewrote it. Clara found the papers first, her face pale, hands trembling as she handed them to me. Did you know about this? She asked. I hadn't, but it didn't shock me. Sophie wasn't just wounded, she was humiliated, and for her, that demanded a fight. It didn't matter that Clara had never asked me for a cent or that my mind was as clear as ever. None of that mattered to someone who thought love was owed just because she was nearby. I called Mr. Grayson right away. She doesn't have a leg to stand on, he reassured me. You were fully aware, and there's no proof of manipulation, but this could get ugly. Ugly, that word lingered like a storm cloud for days. Sophie didn't stop there, she reached out to my siblings, who she hadn't spoken to in years, spinning tales of me being controlled. She talked to neighbors, even tried to get my doctor to sign a statement questioning my mental capacity. He refused, thank goodness. But the ripples spread anyway. Folks at the pharmacy gave me odd looks, whispers followed me in the grocery store, and even the nurse at my oncology clinic paused before asking, do you have family helping you through this? Through it all, Clara stayed, never asking me to defend her, never complaining, just showing up, refilling my pill organizer, cooking bland meals I could stomach, sitting with me through the worst nights when nausea hit like a tidal wave. One morning, I found her out front, silently scrubbing the porch, her movements sharp, her shoulders tense. I stepped outside, clutching my robe. You okay, Clara? I asked. She paused, then turned to me. I never wanted any of this, she said, her voice heavy. I didn't come here for money or property or to be part of some legacy. I just came to help. I nodded, my heart aching for her. And you've done more than you'll ever know. Her eyes welled up, but she blinked the tears back. Then why does it feel like I'm paying a price for it? I didn't have an answer, and the silence between us felt heavy with truth. That night, Sophie showed up again, no knock, just the creak of the front door like a warning of a coming storm. Clara was in the kitchen. Sophie stormed straight to me. You don't see it, do you? She said, looming over me. She's cutting you off from everyone, making you think I'm the bad guy. I looked up at her, unflinching. You've made yourself the bad guy, Sophie. Her face twisted with anger. I'm your daughter. And I'm your mother, I said softly. A mother you've taken for granted your whole adult life. She started toward the hallway, then stopped, locking eyes with Clara, who stood frozen. For a moment, I saw it, pure, raw hatred in Sophie's gaze, not just jealousy, but fear. She was losing her grip, her story, her image as the dutiful daughter. I spoke before she could. If you keep attacking the people who care about me, you won't just lose the inheritance, you'll lose me. She didn't respond, just slammed the door behind her like a gunshot echoing through the house. The next morning, I called Mr. Grayson again. I want everything recorded, I told him. Every visit, every threat, every legal move she makes. Sophie might have started a war, but I wasn't fighting with anger, I was fighting with truth, clarity, and boundaries I should have set years ago. The cancer moved faster than any of us expected. By late autumn, I was frilier than ever, my body a map of bones and bruises, my skin tinged yellow from too many pills and too little strength. Simple things, bathing, brushing my hair, standing, felt like triumphs. Clara never faltered, adjusting everything around me so I never felt less than human. She treated me with the same respect on my weakest days as she did when I could still walk to the mailbox alone. We didn't talk as much anymore, not because we had nothing to say, but because our silence had become a kind of comfort, full of understanding instead of emptiness. The grandkids came by less often, Sophie stopped bringing them, but sometimes they'd ride their bikes over, knock on the back door, and sit with me on the porch, quiet but present. Their presence was enough to warm my heart. One afternoon, my youngest granddaughter slipped a drawing onto my lap, a picture of me and Clara, both with big, crayon-drawn smiles, labeled my two grandmas in bright colors. I couldn't hold back the tears. Clara saw it, froze, then knelt beside me, wrapping me in a silent hug. That night, I sobbed harder than I had in months, not out of fear of dying, but because I'd finally tasted what real love felt like, and I wasn't ready to let it go. One Sunday morning, Sophie slipped in unannounced, but there was a softness to her I hadn't seen before. Her face was nearly bare, her outfit plain, no fancy purse or bold sunglasses, just her, clutching a tattered envelope. Clara was out tending the backyard, and Sophie stood before me, silent for what felt like ages. Then she gently placed the envelope on the table. "What's that?" I asked, my voice rough from fatigue. "It's a letter from Dad," she said quietly. "I found it after he passed and never showed you." My hands shook as I lifted it, his familiar handwriting staring back at me. He'd written it to her long ago, confessing his cruelty, admitting I'd left to save myself, saying I'd done right, and urging her to let go of her anger toward me. Tears streamed down my face as I read his words. Sophie stood frozen, her own eyes glistening. "I blamed you because it was easier than facing his faults," she said, her voice trembling. "And I kept blaming you even when I knew the truth." I looked up at her, weary but curious. "What about now?" I asked softly. Her voice broke as she answered, "Now I see I've let you down." Her pain was raw, not for show, just real and human. Clara walked in just then, hesitating at the doorway, uncertain of the moment. Sophie turned to her and said, "I misjudged you." My pride took over, and fear drove everything. Clara gave a slow, quiet nod, saying nothing. Sophie faced me again. "I'm not asking for anything," she murmured. "Not forgiveness, not the house, not a way back in, I just needed to tell you." For the first time, I felt her words were genuine. I reached out and took her hand. "I don't hate you, Sophie," I said. "But things are different between us now." She nodded, her eyes heavy with acceptance. "I understand." She left soon after, no theatrics, just a quiet departure, like the end of a long, aching chapter. Clara sat beside me as the sun sank behind the trees, casting a warm glow. "You okay?" she asked gently. I nodded. "I'm worn out," I said, and it wasn't just the illness. I was exhausted from carrying silent truths, from chasing love that came in stingy doses. But now I'd spoken my heart, and I'd heard what I needed to. Forgiveness isn't a wide-open door, sometimes it's just a lock softly giving way. The day I truly let go wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, almost simple. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window, painting everything in a warm, golden hue. Clara was humming a melody I didn't know, slicing apples, the scent of cinnamon drifting around us. She'd taken to baking again, saying it brought back memories of sweeter days. I sat in my favorite armchair, wrapped in a soft blanket, watching the trees sway like they'd been waiting for my attention all along. Sophie came by that afternoon, slipping in without a word, no announcement needed anymore. Her face was bare, her posture relaxed, carrying a small tray with tea and a scone, still warm from the store. "Your favorite," she said softly, setting it down. I smiled faintly. "You didn't forget," I said. She sat across from me, hands fidgeting nervously. "Can I stay for a bit?" she asked. "You're already here," I replied warmly. We sat together, no accusations or old wounds, just two women, one older, one finally growing, sharing a quiet moment. Her eyes were red as she looked at me. "I know we can't go back to how things were," she said. "We shouldn't," I said gently. "But we can still move forward." She nodded, taking in my words. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said quietly. I sipped my tea, letting its warmth settle me. "You don't," I said honestly, "but I'm offering it anyway." A tear slid down her face. "Why?" she asked. "Because forgiving you," I said, "frees me, not you." Clara walked in then, pausing when she saw Sophie. Their eyes met, and I held my breath. "I'm sorry," Sophie said softly, "for everything I said and tried to do." Clara's expression stayed steady as she nodded. "Thank you," she said simply. No embraces, no big gestures, just a quiet understanding, like two people who'd weathered different storms finally standing on shared ground. Sophie stayed for dinner, helping Clara in the kitchen. They didn't talk much, but the air was calm, holding a delicate new truce. Later, alone, I pulled out the folder with my updated will, reading over the names and choices I'd made. I didn't change a word, not out of anger, but because my decision was about truth, not punishment. Sophie wasn't the heart of my story anymore, and that was okay. She was still in it, but no longer the center of my world. My legacy would live in the hearts of those who loved me openly, the grandkids who'd remember my joy, not my silence, the woman who brought warmth when life turned cold, the version of myself who finally chose peace over duty. That night, I wrote a letter to myself, not to Sophie or Clara. I wrote that I was proud of the woman who finally drew a line, of the grandmother who loved without expecting anything back, of the woman who stopped waiting to be chosen and chose herself. I folded it, tucked it into my bedside drawer, and lay down with a gentle smile. This story didn't end in bitterness, it ended in freedom, and that, after all I'd been through, was more than enough. Thank you for hearing me out. Please hit subscribe and share your own story in the comments. Your voice counts.